Hopefully, you've had a chance to watch the first episode of this M&A series, where I lay the foundation for viewing M&A deals through an operational lens. In today's episode, it's all about the buy side. I'll help acquirers develop a structured approach to identifying, evaluating, and selecting acquisition targets beyond just the financials, instead, focusing on operational success. We'll further establish how most acquisitions don't fail because of bad financials, usually. They fail because of poor operational fit. Yes. And if you're not a believer now, you will be by the end of this series because we're going to go over some real world examples of exactly what I'm talking about. We'll be diving into the buy side strategy and pulling it apart, how to identify the right target from an operational and scalability lens. The first step is to define your acquisition goals. I mean, before you start looking for targets, you need to clarify why you're acquiring in the first place. No, I mean, really define why. Are you expanding into new markets, gaining key capabilities, seeking cost synergies, or maybe you want to grow your market impact? Okay, so let's quickly go through some of these. Some of the most common buy side acquisition goals typically look like market expansion. You're either entering into new geographies or customer segments, expanding your capabilities. Maybe you want to acquire intellectual property, technology, or expertise. Cost synergies. That's like reducing overhead and increasing efficiency. And vertical integration. That's strengthening your supply chain. Now, financials will tell you where a company has been, but operations will tell you where it's going. So, before even getting into the numbers, you need to assess operational strengths and weaknesses. The second step here is the operational factors to assess before financial due diligence. The first one here is technology and systems. Does your prospect have an outdated ERP system or CRM system? Technology and does your prospect have outdated ERP systems or CRM system? Things like that. You'll want to take a look at the entire technology stack. Do they have fragmented software, which is a real red flag, or things like a homegrown system that are often outdated and compartmentalized? Next, you want to look at process and scalability. The next one here is processes and scalability. Is the team using manual workarounds? Have you really checked, or is it kind of like a guess? Is there a high dependency on things like tribal knowledge, which we do go over quite a bit on this channel? Are there things like updated SOPs or standard operating documents like your processes and your procedures? Or is everything out of date and no one really makes any use of any of it? Rather, they're typically doing things their own way. And this is probably one of the most common things I see in general. The next one here I want you to look at is the workforce and leadership. When I say workforce and leadership, what I mean is who is actually running this business and can they scale? Do employees have autonomy with guidelines, of course, or is it just a few people up top making all the decisions? This is also actually pretty common. And the last thing I really want you to look at is supply chain and vendor risk. One of the biggest gaps I see across the board is single source supplier and the lack of supplier region diversity. Next, I want you to look at within the supply chain vendor risk is the dependency on legacy contracts and the dependency on supplier relationships, meaning, will the current terms stand if ownership changes? Now, the third step here is assessing cultural fit and leadership stability. Another big mistake buyers make is ignoring culture and leadership dynamics. Even in the most financially sound deals, they can implode if cultures don't align. Here's what to look for: fit and leadership scalability. The first thing here is decision making style. Now, this is typically categorized as centralized versus decentralized. Let me explain this. In centralized decision making, authority rests at the top management level, while decentralized decision making empowers lower level, even individual employees to make decisions. And this, frankly, will be contingent on your goals, your personal goals. Are you looking for a style of decision making that is similar to yours or different from yours? And I want you to try not to answer that too quickly. We'll go over an example in just a minute that may make you think one way or the other. Next, here is employee engagement. I believe this tells a story in and of itself. Does this company have high turnover? Are the teams dysfunctional? Is there, I call it a tribe vibe, or are they collegial? This will actually be really important within the transition period. The next thing here is leadership buy-in. Will those key executives stay post acquisition? And the last thing I want to mention here really is the integration willingness. Are they open to change or are they resistant? Is asking enough? Actually, no. You need to look at history. What changes have they implemented over the years? What of those has been successful and what has been unsuccessful? Okay. Now, the fourth step in this is the red flags. What could kill this deal? Some operational red flags can be fixed post acquisition, while others are actually a deal breaker. Here's what should make you pause before signing that LOI or letter of intent. Most of these will actually be pretty obvious, but they're worth mentioning, and I want to keep them sort of top of mind. Frankly, these are red flags in general, whether you're thinking about acquiring, being acquired, or you're not even sure. This is any business that is dealing with, or maybe not dealing with, any of these issues should right now make this a top priority. Okay, the first is poor systems, outdated, not scalable infrastructure. The next red flag is over reliance on key personnel. This business falls apart if that one person leaves or goes on a vacation. The next thing here is weak or non existent processes, no SOPs. Everything runs on an ad hoc sort of decision making process, right? And lastly, here, the legal and compliance gaps. Now, this is unresolved regulatory risks. I'll close out this list of red flags by mentioning there is a long list of red flags, and we don't have time to go over all of them in this video, obviously. But I think this is a great place to start. Now, before you say, nope, that won't happen to us. We work with M&A professionals. They do their due diligence. We've done this before. They've done this before. Actually, no. Let's discuss an example of an M&A fail due to operational misalignment because I know finance folks look at the numbers first and ops second. And I'm not picking on you finance folks. I'm just stating the facts that you tend to look at ops second. I like to share these real world examples so that you can see what I'm actually talking about when we're talking about the idea of reviewing operational alignment first. And this will save you money and a headache. And it's not just because I specialize in ops. Okay. I find examples like this are far more digestible, and you've likely already seen a lot of them in the news, especially the one I'm about to resurrect from the dead. Okay, this one is a $1.7 billion M&A disaster. Yep, back in 1994, which seems like an eternity ago, Quaker Oats, which is the parent company of brands like Gatorade, Aunt Jemima, Captain Crunch, Life, all these sort of ready to eat cereals, rice cakes, chewy granola bars, things like that. They decided they wanted to acquire a company called Snapple for $1.7 billion, believing that they could actually replicate the success that they had with Gatorade, which was at the time their money driver. And maybe it is today, I'm not sure. However, just 27 months after that acquisition, Quaker sold Snapple for $300 million. That is a $1.4 billion loss. Given the title of this video and the reason for this series, why do you guys think that this deal failed? Yep, it is because of operational misalignment. Let's dig into the details. All right. Now, they had mismatched distribution strategies. Let me explain this for a second for those that don't understand supply chain. Quaker Oats used something called a centralized mass market distribution model, which is shipments from suppliers are transported to a central location. Okay. Usually these are full load quantities. They're also referred to in the supply chain lingo as FTL. Okay. Rather than to each distributor location. Loads are then consolidated from a number of suppliers usually in single full load. This might make sense. So this strategy typically works well for like grocery stores or these like large retail chains. Hopefully that makes more sense. Now, Snapple, on the other hand, really thrived on that independent distributor network. This is where they built really strong relationships with like convenience stores and which is a totally different kind of distribution strategy. You may already see the problem, but if you don't, I'm about to explain. So now we're post acquisition. Quaker did what most of you may be thinking about doing for your own businesses, which is they dismantled Snapple's entire supply chain system, disrupting relationship that they had with these small distributors, which is what fueled Snapple's success. Okay. That's just one of the misalignments. The next one here is the culture clash and the brand misalignment. Now, if you recall earlier, we talked about culture and brand misalignment. Here is how this one unfolds. Snapple had kind of an edgy, maybe even a little quirky grassroots image, where Quaker Oats, they're usually a little bit more of a traditional giant. They tried to mainstream Snapple's brand, alienating those loyal customers. Now, marketing campaigns really failed to connect with Snapple's original audience. And while some of that is kind of out of operational hands, at the end of the day, they really need to work together during that due diligence process. The next challenge with this transaction is poor integration execution. Now, Quaker underestimated how different the two business models were and tried to force Snapple into its existing corporate structure. This is actually pretty common even today, and it rarely ever works. Certainly not with a very careful plan. And even then, there are so many other triggers that can make this go horribly wrong. So, what's the result? Key executives at Snapple and distributors left, and they took that industry knowledge with them. And they also took the relationships with them. When operational alignment isn't a top priority, overpaying without understanding operational synergies is basically the only outcome. In this case, Quaker paid a premium, to say the least, expecting a strong synergy with their Gatorade brand. However, as we can see now, what they should have seen then are red flags. Gatorade and Snapple had two totally different sales channels, different pricing models, and different consumer base, which was kind of limiting any cross-selling opportunities. Now, as a consumer, you actually might like both brands and you might consume both brands, but all of the checkpoints that I just mentioned made this sale a very expensive fail. The aftermath here was Quaker Oats sold Snapple in 1997 to a company called Triarch at a steep discount of $300 million, which was a fraction of the original price, if you remember. Triarch did exactly what you might be thinking. They restored that independent distribution model and Snapple rebound. Triarch later sold Snapple to a company called Cadbury Schweppes in 2000, so a pretty quick turnaround actually. And if you want to know what Triarch actually sold Snapple for $1.45 billion, which is a substantial profit. So here's some key takeaways. The importance of understanding operational differences before the acquisition. Don't disrupt what makes a brand successful. Ensure cultural and strategic alignment, not just financial synergy. Scalability strategies must fit the acquired company's core goals and core strengths. Here's a good lesson, I think. A great financial deal can still fail if operational alignment isn't a priority. Nothing good comes from believing you know best because of your past experience. I really want you to try to use data and facts that are right in front of you to make these kinds of decisions. Now, the fifth and final step here, for this episode at least, is operational scalability before acquisition. Okay. A business that's working fine at its current size may not work actually double the size. You need to stress test the scalability before making that purchase. How? Okay, here are some questions you should be asking. Now, can the current company handle rapid growth with its current systems? I also wrote a pretty decent article a while back about this idea, and I called it the Shark Tank effect. This really relates to companies, smaller companies usually, that go on that show, Shark Tank, that's here in America, looking for funding. Well, frankly, most are really looking for like a jump start to their brand, right? With an accelerated marketing boost going on, that type of television show. The problem here with the Shark Tank effect, and the same problem that I'm telling you to look into is exactly what I'm explaining here. Most of the businesses that go on Shark Tank don't have the infrastructure to support growth or rapid growth, right? And even though you may not rapidly grow like a Shark Tank, like the Shark Tank effect, the same principle still stands, right? If you don't have the right infrastructure in place, this acquisition will be a fail. Okay, next. Are there manual processes that are going to be bottlenecks for your operations? And lastly, I want you to look at, will the current relationships be able to scale, or do you need to hire new talent? These are important questions with not always obvious answers, actually. What I'd like you to take away from this entire video is buy smart and scale smart. A great acquisition isn't just about price, it's also about fit. If the target isn't operationally sound, it's probably not a smart buy. Now, take the time to evaluate systems, culture, scalability, and leadership before financial due diligence. On the next episode, we'll be tackling how to prepare your business for a sale, what you should be really looking at before you sign on that dotted line. I'll see you next time.